The Butcher Baker is one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, mainly due to his unique method of killing. Robert Hansen would kidnap girls and fly them out to remote parts of Alaska before setting them loose and hunting them down. To him, they were nothing more than animals. Robert was able to maintain a perfect image around his small town for some time, but cracks in his facade did begin to show. Though no one really knew how sick and twisted this man really was until his sick fantasy came crashing down in October 1983. Robert Christian Hansen was born on February 15, 1939 in Esterville, Iowa. His father was a Danish immigrant who owned a bakery. Robert was made to work in the bakery from a young age and didn't have a great relationship with his father, who was a strict disciplinarian. School life wasn't easy for young Robert. He was shy, had a stutter, and suffered from bad acne, making him the ideal target for school bullies. The girls he liked didn't reciprocate his feelings, and Robert spent much of his time alone. Robert grew comfortable in his own company. He got into hunting, and over time, his negative views on women festered beneath the surface. When he turned 18 years old in 1957, Robert enlisted in the United States Army Reserve. After serving for a year, Robert was promoted to an assistant drill instructor in Pocahontas, Iowa. Here, he married a young woman he had met, but Robert's life was far from on the right track. At 21 years old, Robert convinced someone to help him burn down a school bus garage. This young arson assistant couldn't keep the secret in for very long and ended up confessing. Robert was arrested and his wife filed for divorce. In his eyes, it was another instance of being treated unfairly. Robert served 20 months of his 3-year sentence before being released. He did have a few more stints in jail, but for minor petty theft. During this time, Robert married another local woman. In 1967, he made the move to Anchorage, Alaska, wanting to get far away from his old life in Iowa. Robert's wife moved with him, and they had 2 children together. People seemed to like Robert and the family. He was an unassuming man who ran a small bakery, but cracks began to show in the facade he had built. Robert, the man who wanted everyone to think of him as the small-town baker, who had an affinity for hunting, was arrested twice in 1972. The one time was for the abduction and attempted sexual assault of a housewife, and the second time for sexually assaulting a sex worker. The authorities didn't know it at the time, but this was just the beginning. Robert pleaded no contest to the charge assault with a deadly weapon regarding his attack on the housewife, and the sexual assault charge on the sex worker was dropped due to a plea bargain. He was handed a 5-year sentence, but he only served 6 months, after which Robert was placed on a work release program and put into a halfway house. Robert's killing spree began the next year and lasted 12 long years. His reign of terror was almost temporarily halted in 1976 after he was arrested for shoplifting a chainsaw. Robert was sentenced to 5 years behind bars, but he appealed the sentence and was released on time served. The murders then continued. The crimes. Robert's modus operandi, meaning his preferred method, was to pick up a sex worker in his car under the guise of being a customer. He then took her to his home and forced her inside at gunpoint before sexually assaulting her. But Robert wasn't done there. After he had violated the woman, he flew her out to a remote area in his plane. Then the hunt began. Robert released the woman and hunted her down before either killing her with a knife or shooting her. Some believe that Robert's first victim was 18-year-old Celia Van Zanten, or Beth as she was known to those around her, though he himself has denied this. Celia was kidnapped on December 22, 1971, before being bound and sexually assaulted. Her chest had also been cut with a knife. Once he was done with her, Celia's abductor dumped her into a deep ravine while she was still alive and bound. She froze to death before anyone found her. Analysis of the scene showed Celia had tried to climb out but was unable to. Her body was discovered on December 25th. There was no evidence that tied Robert to Celia's abduction, but the similarities between her case and the other women is something that has always raised suspicions. Robert's confirmed murder victims include Roxanne Eastland, Lisa Futrell, Sue Luna, Joanna Messina, Sherry Morrow, Andrea Altieri, Paula Golding, Dylan Frey, Angela Federn, Malai Larson, Teresa Watson, Tamara Peterson, and 2 Jane Does. who became known as Eklutna Annie and Horseshoe Harriet due to the location of their bodies. Roxanne and Annie's bodies were never found. Cindy Paulson. On June 13, 1983, Robert abducted 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. He offered her $200 to perform oral sex, but when she got into the car, he pulled his gun as he had done so many times before. Robert drove Cindy to his home in Muldoon, where he sexually assaulted and tortured her. Robert kept her chained to a post in his basement by her neck while he slept on a couch in the room. When he woke up, Robert grabbed Cindy and put her in his car. He was heading to Merrifield Airport and told Cindy that he was going to take her out to his cabin. Had Cindy not done what she did next, she would undoubtedly become another name on his list. While Robert loaded the cockpit and had his back turned, Cindy crawled from the back seat and opened the driver's side door. She made a break for it and ran as fast as she could to 6th Avenue. When Robert spotted her, he desperately ran to try and catch her, but Cindy was able to flag down a passing truck and get inside. Authorities were notified and the Anchorage Police Department took Cindy to their headquarters. She was able to accurately describe her abductor, which fit Robert Hansen perfectly. Despite this, when Robert was questioned in regards to the crime, he denied the accusations and accused Cindy of extorting him. Despite his prior known crimes, like the sexual assaults on 2 women in 1971, Robert's meek demeanor was enough to keep him off the suspect list. An alibi from a close friend also helped. Arrest and conviction. The Alaska State Troopers strongly suspected that they had a serial killer on the loose in Anchorage. Multiple sex workers and topless dancers had seemingly vanished without a trace, and bodies had slowly started to be uncovered. And then came FBI agent John Douglas. John's name was famous in criminal investigative circles, as he was one of the pioneers in criminal profiling. When he looked at the case, John believed that the killer was a man with hunting experience and low self-esteem, who had a history of being rejected by women. If that wasn't detailed enough, John theorized that the man had a speech impediment. Even though he had been previously cleared, it was unmistakable that Robert Hansen fit that description to a T. He also had a plane, and his cabin was located in Matanuska, Susitna Valley, where 2 women's bodies had been uncovered. All of this prompted police to obtain a search warrant for Robert's home. When they made their way inside, they had no doubt that the monster had been him this whole time. While searching his home, not only did detectives uncover countless souvenirs that had belonged to the missing women, they also found an aviation map that was nearly tucked behind Robert's headboard. On the map, there were 24 small X's. These X's were markers of where he had buried his victims. The evidence was clear as day. There was no getting out of this for Robert. In 1984, he confessed to murdering 17 women and raping 30 others over 12 years. He received a plea deal where he was only charged with 4 of the 17 murders. But this didn't affect his sentencing. Robert Hansen was given 461 years plus life in prison without the possibility of parole. He died in 2014 after serving 30 years in Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seward, Alaska.